Hi, my name's Amanda Trout and welcome to Reality Arts Podcast. Each week I will bring you a different insight and inspiration about art, creativity and arts in health. Join me as we step out of our comfort zones, unwrap those hidden gems and move forward in our creative purpose. You're listening to Reality Arts, helping you to increase your creativity and unlock your hidden talents. Hello and welcome to the bonus Stepping Out challenge. Over the next 31 days, I'll be posting an additional post for you during October. And it's part of a bigger series. It's a 31-day challenge that I'm doing on my blog. And today and tomorrow actually, I'll be talking about the challenge or the series that I created called 31 Plants in My Tropical Garden. So I moved to the Caribbean a few years ago, 2 years to be exact, and I try and spend time between Barbados and London where possible. So I decided to do this challenge when I started growing my own food and plants in a space that could accommodate some of the things that I wanted to grow in this tropical environment. And I've been collecting and purchasing seeds for years, and I just kind of put them down or, labeled them. And in our current home, I was set the challenge on planting on a slope with an extremely tight budget. So I had to be creative in what I did, and the creative gardener was born. So as I travel around Barbados, I come across many trees and plants that intrigue me, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know about their properties. I wanted to know what they were beneficial for. I wanted to know if they could be eaten. Because a lot of the traditional plants and trees and herbs, some of that has been forgotten as the older generation die away. A lot of them, would say, oh, drink this bush tea. And the generation that would drink the bush tea would not necessarily have been able to have identified it, or whether they'd spent time with their grandparent or great-grandparent in the garden. So a lot of that knowledge is disappearing, and you will hear my dog in the background. He's trying to get somebody's attention. Anyway, so I, would stop people, especially the elderly, and say, are you familiar with this? Do you know what it's for? Some would say, yeah, we used it as a child, but not necessarily know what it was used for in terms of a food. So it's been a really exciting journey as I, learn much more, do my research, and to see many of the plants that I'm able to grow from seed. Some of the things I've brought as small plants, because I found things like rosemary, where I grew that in London with no problem. I had a massive, great big rosemary bush. In Barbados, it just I couldn't cut it from seed, and I was having a lot of problems with the small plant. So I purchased the plant, and that is growing very slowly, and so just more nurturing and more love and attendance, I think, is what's needed. The other thing I had problem with growing from seed is basil and some of the other herbs. So I brought basil, I brought what else did I brought? Oregano, I brought the rosemary, my marjoram and my coriander. I planted hundreds of seeds and they haven't grown. So that's one of the solutions for me. Like, if you can't grow it from seed, it might be the soil, it might be the conditions, who knows? There's nothing wrong with buying a small plant. And I've done that, as I say, with my basil. And my basil now, I've got from one pot, I managed to get 3 different plants out of them, and then they've just grown really massive now. So the 31 plant series was a way for me to share the plants that I was growing and how they looked in their small state. I found it encouraging to do it that way, because you normally see plants, fully grown, bearing fruit. And so to find them in their small state has been useful for me, because then when other things are growing in the garden and I'm not quite sure, I can actually look at some of the plants that I've grown myself, and then they're easier to identify. And it takes the mystery out of growing, if you start small and you build up. And I feel if I could do it, then you could definitely do it. So filming the series was a way to document the process and something for me to look back on to see how far I've come. So I did the 31 series, I did how I felt about growing, and I'm just continuing. It's just been a real joy kind of, doing updates and then meeting the gardening community around the world. Some of my plants, as I said, have done really well. Others have died, and it's then the adventure to see what I need to do to correct the soil for the next time. What happened to me at the beginning was that, I planted all these things and a lot of them came up, and then most of them were eaten, especially things like the melon and the squash. And it was quite disheartening, but you have to really grow a thick skin, because those things are going to happen, and you're dealing with nature, you're dealing with pests, you're dealing with other animals that live in the garden, and so that comes as part and parcel. Some of the plants gave the appearance of having died, and you just thought, oh my goodness. And luckily enough, I didn't kind of like dig them up and say, okay, let's start again. I left them, and what appeared to be dead actually wasn't. It must have just, had a stress, dropped all the leaves. It looked like it had just a twig, but then it resurrected itself. And this has been really great to see. But there have been other things that I've wanted to grow, like I'd brought to ylang-ylang plants, and they did really well when I brought them, and then suddenly they just died off, both of them. It was just like they were planted in two separate places, they were fed, they were watered, but they didn't survive. And that's something that I definitely want to grow, and so I have to do some research as to, well, what did I do wrong? So one of the rewarding things that has come from sharing about what I'm growing is that it's so exciting to see that you can put something in the ground and it bears fruit. The fruit trees, the plants, and the things that have so many beneficial, medicinal and nutritional properties. So one of the things that bore fruit quite quickly was my papaya. I planted them, and within that same year, I was picking papaya off my trees. So that's, it's been really exciting to see that. And there are so many plants that I've wanted to grow over the years that, being in a colder climate, I wasn't able to, and I'm now able to create that food forest and edible landscape, and it's pleasing to all the senses. That's what I want. When you walk into my garden space, you smell the aromas of the flowers, you feast your eyes on the colour, the smells of the fruits as they ripen, and then you're able to pick and eat. Anyway, that's the goal. And I think I'm on my way there, because, in the mornings I come out, I pick my spiced basil for my spiced tea, and I have my lemongrass, basil and moringa infused water, and it's really great. Though these are things that I never dreamed that I would be able to do. I will encourage you to think about using your space to grow something, whatever size you have. It's very rewarding and you will learn much about yourself in the process. And if you're on a budget and want to start growing your own, why don't you start growing some of the seeds that come from the fruit or vegetables that you would normally buy? You can start sprouting pulses and grow them on from there. And many of the seeds that you can purchase are quite economical. And you can start quite quickly. I find things like, squash, I guess it depends. If you live in a colder climate, then, you might need a greenhouse or, a small greenhouse, depending on your space. And places like the pound store or dollar store, they also have a garden section, and you can pick up supplies like pots and soil, and even some of the things like roses, little small plants that are ready to put in the ground, some of the berries they have. I've not brought seeds from these stores, so I can't say how well, in terms of how well they grow. So I'll be sharing another series on my gardening channel for those who want to grow and garden on an extremely tight budget. So please subscribe and click on the notification bell when you go onto my Creative Gardener channel so that you know when a new video has been uploaded. And I currently post 2 or 3 new videos every week. So what has been your approach to your space, your green space? You might only have a balcony, but you can add a couple of pots and get some plants growing. If you don't have an outdoor space, you could get some pot plants. And a lot of the plants grown in the Caribbean that grow outdoors in the warm environment, you can grow them indoors and you can bring the tropics into your home. So do the plants that you have, if you have been growing stuff and they might be neglected, do they need a new lease of life? Can you look for some ways in which you can do some DIY and create a green space of your dreams? It's possible. So tomorrow I'm going to share the second part of my tropical garden series, and I hope during this month that you find some time to challenge yourself, be creative and stretch yourself. And why not join me each day for the rest of October as we dive into some exciting challenges and look at ways in which they can impact your own life. Because when you start, there will definitely be an impact. The more you put in is the more you get out. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. It's never too late to start. The main thing is just take one step at a time and do something you find interesting. I'll list in the notes some suggested places that you can go. I've got some suggested books on my Amazon gardening site. It's not a gardening site, it's a selection of books on Amazon that I would recommend. And there's some other things like the Dollar Tree book outlet. So if you're interested in looking at some books that will help you start, if you want to get some information, but definitely, check out the YouTube channel. There'll be some hints and tips on there, and you can definitely learn something from the other channels that are posting about gardening from scratch, container gardening. There's all sorts on there. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. You can check me out on my blog or YouTube channel for more creative insights, videos and reviews. Stay blessed and be a blessing.